Hi, everyone. We just had a phenomenal, thought-provoking conversation during Eating Disorder Awareness Week with Stephanie Roth Goldberg, who's a psychotherapist, a certified eating disorder specialist, and she's somebody who's rode front row in my spin class before our Running Explained life took place. So it was such an honor to have her on to talk about, as both a runner and a clinician, what she sees in her practice when it comes to disordered eating and eating disorders in endurance sports. We talked about the line between being committed to your training and compulsive behaviors. We also spoke about how somebody can be high performing and hit PRs, but still be deeply unwell. And some of the signs that run coaches and fitness professionals can look out for, and what we can do as runners if we suspect that we're struggling ourselves.
It's a great episode. A lot of information dropped that helps everyday runners, coaches, for fitness, for trainers, anyone to kind of help you get ahead of this. It's a slippery slope sometimes that people go down towards an eating disorder. In this episode, we touched on a lot of that to give you some tips and just points to look towards. So I think you'll really enjoy it. As always, if you have any running needs, whether it's training plans, one-on-one coaching, coaching consults, head to runningexplained.com, and we hope you enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Running Explained podcast, your go-to resource for learning the how, what, and why of running so you can train smarter, race stronger, and actually enjoy the process with a more human approach. We're your hosts, Coach Amanda Katz.
And Coach Nick Listava. And today we have a special guest with us, Stephanie Roth Goldberg, who is a psychotherapist and certified eating disorder specialist. Thanks for joining us, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me.
Stephanie, we're starting this today, by the way. This is what we're doing in the beginning of every guest episode. So if you're like, what is she doing? What is she doing? Not that you're paying that close attention to us, friends, but Stephanie will be the first. Stephanie, who are you?
It's funny you're asking because I could say that you already know that, Amanda, but here we are. I'll answer the question. I am, as Nick said, I'm a psychotherapist and I specialize in eating disorders and particularly in the intersection of eating disorders with athletes. I practice in both New York City and New Jersey. I do some run coaching very minimally on the side. I'm a marathoner. At one other time in my life, I was an Ironman. I'm a mom. And I think that's a good list.
It is a good list. Did I also see that you're a licensed clinical social worker too? Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, that's where the psychotherapist.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I bring that up. My wife is one too, and she worked in New Jersey for a while doing it, and I've learned a lot about the world of therapy from her in social work. So yeah.
Yes. I'm trained as a social worker and a psychoanalyst.
So to bring anyone who was on the outside of that inside joke between Stephanie and I, Stephanie said that I already know her. Yes, I do. Because Stephanie has been in my cycling studio as a student.
Yeah, for a long time, many years ago.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
One day we'll go for a run together. That has never happened, but
we happen to sign up for the same races, and we don't know that we're signed up for the same races. We just show up, and then we find out when one of us posts at the end of said race that we're there. That's happened many a times.
That's true. We should discuss spring races and fall races.
We'll do that. We'll do that offline.
Yeah.
That's great.
One day I'm going to show up at your for a class of yours, Amanda, and so that's two happening.
Yeah. That is fun. Yeah, you should do that.
Yeah. People like those classes, and I like teaching them. And I do miss Stephanie very much. I remember when she moved, and I said to her, I said, it's not goodbye, it's see you later. But the later never came, Stephanie, and I'm holding a grudge.
I know. One day soon, I'll come in the city for a run.
I love it. Anytime. So you kind of highlighted all of these identities that you hold. And I do love that your identity of being a runner wasn't necessarily your first who. And I think that's an important part of this conversation. So as both a clinician and as a runner, let's talk about what you've seen in your practice. What do what do people outside of the sport of running miss about eating disorders in endurance sports?
I don't know if people know how common they are. I think that, and I think that something else that gets missed is that perhaps people think that runners are always dealing with restrictive type of eating disorders, which is also not true. Um, Many runners have a binge purge cycle. There's runners who just have binge eating disorder. Um, and so I think that when people think about endurance athletes and eating disorders, they almost always think of that restrictive side of things, and it runs the whole spectrum. So that's one thing I would say.
Yeah, I also feel like, and maybe this is what you mean, but I just want to clarify. I always hear the term like there's disordered eating and that people struggle with, and then there's eating disorders, and they're very different. And I think a lot of people probably have disordered eating, and probably maybe have a eating disorder too, but won't like connect those dots, but like don't even acknowledge that the way they fuel their body is in a disordered way.
Yes, they're right. Sort of, we could say disordered eating is like the subclinical eating disorder, right? Like you don't meet full criteria. Perhaps the thoughts or the behaviors are not quite as pervasive or medically dangerous, but it's still disordered and it's still rigid. And I think that is really common in endurance athletes. I think that it is kind of the norm. Um, and I think that that is changing slowly, but maybe it was changing. And maybe now we're in this weird GLP-1 taking over everything. And I don't know where we are on how much change is occurring. But I do think that, when we think about disordered eating, it's still a rigid way of eating. It's still perhaps tying how much movement happened by how many calories you let yourself ingest. It's really driven by rigidity, not flexibility. But someone may not have the medical criteria to meet a full eating disorder diagnosis, which I think is something Amanda actually does a great job of talking about.
She does.
Amanda talks about this all the time. It's like, I fixed my bones, but I didn't need to have 10 fractures or even a fracture.
Right.
And I think that's a great example of like, we could disrupt the pattern before someone meets medical criteria, and we should disrupt the pattern if we can identify it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm very passionate about bone health in general, but I share a lot on my my personal social media page because I just see this increase in injuries and stress fractures and this normalization, as you referenced. Just because it's common doesn't mean we should allow it. Disrupting the pattern is big. And for me personally, I when we had Stephanie on the Between Two Coaches
The other
podcast,
podcast.
Yeah.
the other podcast, um, we did talk about this a little bit, but I was, this episode is being recorded during Eating Disorders Awareness Week here in the United States, and we did that intentionally. And one of the things that has been really important for me is, one, my eating disorders did not take place while I was a runner and or really an active person in general, but the impacts of those complex mental health disorders and what those physical impacts that they had on me or have not presented themselves in a traditional sense that many runners go through. To your point, the stress fractures, for example. And so I did not meet the medical criteria to ask for something like a DEXA scan. And I did have to push in order to get that and to start my journey in healing my bones and getting stronger bones that way when I'm entering my 40s and my 50s and my 60s and my 70s. I can continue to move as well as I can for as long as I can, and I'm not putting myself at an increased risk um, that we know so many, but especially women, will face with osteoporosis and um, other bone and muscle disorders. So I'm I'm curious, Stephanie, when it comes to your practice, you kind of shared like the definitions of disordered eating and eating disorders, and um, who are who are the people who come to see you?
Yeah, I have a good spectrum of clients, some whom, let's say, meet full criteria for an eating disorder and they are professionals and they need to remain in the sport. Or I usually have a few college kids whose college education depends on them playing sport. They committed to play a sport and they have an eating disorder. And many clinicians are not trained and don't understand that you can heal and remain in the sport. It may mean that there is a medical break necessary, but we can still support people, particularly when it's their livelihood, through continuing. And then I have a lot of folks who are runners, like I would say the three of us are. We're really passionate about being active. We love the sport. And either they go to a doctor and they are diagnosed with something like RED-S or enough stress fractures that someone will say, maybe you should speak to a specialist about this. Or people who are referred, there's a few physical therapists I have really good relationships with. And they will say, like, the way that this patient's talking is making me concerned, whether it's the recurrent injuries or just the rigidity around training plans. And that is someone who I often end up with that kind of, again, like Nick was saying, not maybe fully meeting criteria, but a lot of behaviors that interfere with their ability to kind of just have a happy life and a happy life as a runner or athlete. Um, and and because it's, mostly I practice in New York and New Jersey, there's a lot of us who are really passionate about the sport and feel competitive. And it's not our livelihood, but maybe we over identify as that part of ourselves also.
You mentioned RED-S. So RED-S is, for those of you who are listening who don't know, it relative energy deficiency in sport. Can you
Yes.
tell us a little bit more about it, Stephanie?
Yeah, RED-S is usually diagnosed by a doctor. For women, one of the first signs of RED-S that people physically can identify is the loss of menstruation. Loss of bone density is one. Loss of energy, and like being deficient in energy. And we can identify it by moods. There's more robust medical testing around this now. However, I will say a lot of times people come to me and they may have RED-S and don't know it. And then I'll say something like, why don't you go to this doctor and talk to them? And to your point, get a DEXA scan, get some other labs done that general GPs don't know to test for, or a general sports med doctor might just say, like, maybe you shouldn't run so much if you keep getting stress fractures, without looking at underlying causes or asking questions about, volume, nutrition, menstruation, those kinds of things.
Yeah, I feel like you mentioned endurance athletes at least, and I feel like there's this slippery slope of someone who starts to enter the endurance world and, wants to just, maybe get healthy. And then, we fall in love with the sport and we're chasing competitive times and then we're comparing our bodies to others. Social media is a big part of this. And it's this slope that sort of, because this sport almost, we've talked about with others, identifies with, oh, well, the skinnier you are, the faster you'll be. And it's wrong, but it's so easy to fall for that trap and show up at group runs or other things and compare bodies. And so I guess my point here is, and question towards you is, as you work with athletes, what are like some of the early indicator signs that you kind of notice with people that like we could be more aware of before we fall down that slope and it's too late and we're, to a point where we're not even noticing that we're too far gone?
Yeah, I think some of the early signs are how dependent is someone on food intake, and like I always say, like, can you divorce food intake from activity? And if not, that can be a big sign.
So that is ice falling from, excuse me, let me.
I was like, oh, are there woodpeckers in the city now?
I thought
What's
someone just
happening?
banging on her window.
No, it's just 22 inches of snow
Yeah.
facing above freezing temperatures. We're about to have a whole situation here in the New York, New Jersey area. Let me mute myself.
I think some of the other early signs are, again, this rigidity around exercise, not being able to identify pain, like to be able to identify this hurts versus I'm uncomfortable. And so when we can't identify that, we push through it. And that often leads to injury. So being able to slow down enough and say, like, oh, I'm really fatigued. I'm going to take a rest day. Or, you know, there's 22 inches of snow outside. Like maybe I don't actually need to go outside. And if I don't have access to a treadmill, a run doesn't need to happen today, right? Some of that rigidity around training is often a sign. But to your point, Nick, it's such a fine line because if you're training for a race, there is some way in which we need to be disciplined. But so it's really, I work with the thinking around it. Like, what does someone think the fallout is of taking that rest day? And when we get into the thinking a little bit more, we can identify, is this problematic or is this something that, either maybe someone just needs something you guys both talk about, like a better coach who can sort of encourage them to be flexible, and teach them like missing that one run is so not a big deal. I think some of it is like detaching from that culture of more is better is important too.
Do you think that these behaviors are so normalized because of problematic coaches, messaging? What are your thoughts?
It's tricky. Yes, when I work with folks who had a history of being really competitive athletes as youth, there's often a coach who, like in high school or college, really pushed them, and that we have to untangle those beliefs. Um, and there's some sports that I think are worse than others. I've worked with a few swimmers in my years, and swimmers are always have seemed to have really, they just can do more swimming. You can do a lot more hours and it doesn't translate to running also. Um, I think dancers, the culture, if you were a dancer when you were younger and then you move over to being an endurance athlete. But the other thing that is tricky is the very same psychological qualities that make someone a strong endurance athlete are the qualities that we are saying in some ways lead to disordered behavior, right? Like willingness to push through fatigue. You want to finish a marathon strong or a 100-mile bike ride, you have to be willing to push through fatigue. You have to be able to ignore some of those bodily cues to finish your endurance endeavor, right? You need to have a certain amount of discipline and rigidity to be successful. Like you should be rigid with bedtime and discipline around certain things. And you need to have some level of comfort with deprivation, like meaning if you're going to be on the bike for 6 hours or you're going to run for 3 hours, like you're not going to have a nice bathroom to use, or you're not going to like get to have the meal you want. You got to suck down a gel and keep it moving, right? So like the problem is those psychological qualities work in both ways. Like we need them to be strong endurance athletes, and under stress, like that's what pushes us over the edge.
Yeah, and you mentioned coaches, and a lot of coaches, especially in youth sports, it feels like they want results, and like the coaches are, there's a lot of egos in coaching, and the performances of athletes, especially high school age, when you start wanting to, maybe excel, get competitive, you take that with the rest of your life. And coaches see every passing athlete, especially in college, as just someone here's a couple years. They'll make me look great, and then I'll just push them to the max. I don't understand any of this eating stuff, but I know that its skinny body is fast in swimming or something, and just push. And then the athlete moves on, and the coach just keeps coaching. And no one can pinpoint that the coach led a toxic environment, because even when news like that comes out, the running community fights against it. So, these types of things happen, and it's to your point, coaches are either unable to acknowledge these signs or purposely, willingly ignoring it in the face of performance matters the most.
Right. Or not even performance. I think it's really like winning matters the most, like regardless of how someone gets there, right? Like instead of saying they're performing bad at this practice, they need a day off. It's like, oh, you're performing bad. Go run a few more 800s. Like, you know, um, instead of getting someone Gatorade, like it's, uh, I do think there's like, it's interesting talking about coaching though, because there are other ways in which people now have run coaches. And I think some are great and some just send out a program and don't pay attention. And that is also harmful. Like if you're not looking at what your athlete is doing and kind of saying like, that easy run really wasn't easy, or why is your heart rate so high for the last 2 weeks? Like maybe you need some sleep. I think that is problematic too. It's just the messaging is less.
Yeah. Or you forget, or the athlete says a couple times, oh, I forgot to take gels in this long run again this week, or I forgot to bring him. And it's like, that's like a red flag, like immediate for me. Like, you didn't forget to bring your nutrition. Like, we need to talk about this a little more because the 60-mile long run, you just didn't leave your gels at home 3 times in a row.
Yeah, I think that there's a fine line. And I talk about this also in the fitness industry in general. We are not eating disorder specialists. We are not diagnosing people with mental health disorders that are incredibly complex. But our role is to see the signs and symptoms and ask the questions that are being answered in actions or are necessarily not being answered. I've I've worked with um I refer out often to Stephanie and to Holly and physical therapists, and the reason why I do that is because as a coach I'm not equipped, but I consider myself eating disorder informed, disordered eating informed enough, perhaps due to my personal background and experience with multiple eating disorders, to know that, hey, like, you went for your annual physical, and this is like the second or third visit where your ferritin is single digits and you are not, um, you're you're being told to take a CVS iron supplement and you're not, um you're you're dragging throughout your day, you're missing your period, and you're sharing all these in the notes. And there I to your point, Stephanie, I've heard of coaches that are just kind of ignoring these comments because they're like, well, that's not me. That's not me. But as a coach, it's actually your job to be able to have a network of professionals to say, hey, I think it'd be great if I could refer you to uh, Dr. Stephanie to support you in X, Y, and Z. Um, and more times than not, I've I've never been met with resistance from an athlete when I'm referring out. They, in fact, I think are so happy to have a resource, because I think that it is so challenging to kind of to define what the issue is, even in a chat GBT AI world.
Yeah.
Like there are people who are just like searching the dark web for answers and like, why am I so tired all the time? But I'm taking this supplement, but it doesn't make any sense until you kind of like there's a specialist or there's an expert that actually works with a population that can support you.
Yes, I think that's right. And I think that like every profession has ethics, right? So like, and I think, you know, the ethics of being good at whatever you do is knowing our limits and when we need to refer to someone else.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I mean, I same thing, Amanda. I've had athletes who I talk to about it and they never resistance. And the worst thing that happens for me, and it's not terrible, but like they go out and hire someone and they take a break from running the coaching with me, but they need that. And that's
Same.
okay. And
Yeah.
like, I get it that to some coaches, this is my business, but your business is people too, and taking care of people. You're a coach. And so have some responsibility. Yes, your athlete may pause with you, but if they don't get healthy, they're not going to be running anyway. So your job is to help them stay healthy and get able to run for the longest time they want to.
And my guess is they'd pause with you. And if they decide to go back to running, they would
They'll
come
come
back
back.
to
Yeah.
you healthy and strong and ready to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I wanted to ask, can someone be, and I think we know the answer to this, but I want you to talk more about it. Can someone be high performing, quote unquote, and still deeply unwell in their disordered thinking and behaviors?
Yes, absolutely. I don't know if that's what you're thinking. I think that I think maybe you were expecting me to say no, but I think the answer's,
No, I was expecting you to say
oh,
yes, but I wanted you to I wanted to see the passion on your face and talk more
yeah.
about like what you see in practice. Because we're asking this because I think that there's still, unfortunately, this stigma that eating disorders or disordered eating is about food. And it's something that you can see visibly. And you spoke in the beginning about how um a lot of people, the assumption is that, especially in endurance sport, the disordered eating and the dieting or the is rooted in restriction. And I it's beyond that and you see it in your practice.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of times that's why it's hard to identify with people. They're like, "What? I'm still whatever PRing, or I'm still, you know, BQing every year, or whatever it is that they are identifying as like they're high performing." Um, I don't think that people can have an eating disorder and be high performing forever. Uh, and I think that when you look at the high performers, there's often a lot of disruption along the way that we don't see. That person had to take 6 weeks off for a fracture, and maybe they should have taken 12. But they, again, those like psychological qualities that allow people to override pain also allow them to override hunger and all of these other things. And sometimes that's misused to be in performance, right? Like I do a lot of work with people to regulate our nervous system to be able to tell, like, this is pain that I cannot run through, and this is discomfort that we need to run through to like hit that pace. Um, and I think when our brain is, when we are active in an eating disorder, like the wires are all crossed. So people actually can't identify that. It's not that they're refusing to. A lot of people really don't know. Like I've had many people say, why didn't you just stop, to clients of mine or whatever? Like, why didn't you just stop before it was fully injured? And it's like, they don't feel that until you do the work with your nervous system to down regulate enough to notice this is pain or this is discomfort. Um, so yeah, I think you could be high performing for some time. But I also think if you look at that person's life, there are other pieces that are not, if we're going to use the word performing as well. Maybe their social life is struggling. Maybe their relationships are suffering. There's somewhere where you can usually point to that is like the cracks are starting to appear.
Yeah, and there also people forget genetics, right? A lot of people will say, "Oh well, fueling talks about if I take all these gels, I'll run faster." Well, I don't need those gels, and I'm running fast, so obviously I'm fine. You forget the fact that genetics exist, and no one wants to ever admit they have good genetics. I never ran my whole life. I just started 2 years ago, but I was a professional swimmer, or
Right.
or I did all these, or just genetically I am predisposed to when I start this sport after a certain amount of time, it kicks in that it might take someone else longer. And we never want to have those conversations because it's always hard work. I just worked hard and I got fast. I don't have any genetics. Nothing was helping me. And we all want to ignore that. So it's easy to put fueling on this bucket in the side and say, well, I don't need to eat that much or as much as everyone else is saying. I'm running great.
Right. And I think the other thing that allows high performance that people do is like some people are really good at intra fueling. Like I will eat right before my run, I will eat the gels that my coach is telling me to take or my dietitians take. And then maybe I have a protein shake when I get home, but then the rest goes to shit. And I think in some ways that allows to your point, Nick, like some people who are genetically like made up a certain way to perform well in that moment. And again, that's where I'm like, but are you cranky the rest of the day? How's your concentration? How's your sleep? All these other things. But I do think there's this focus too much sometimes on the intra fueling as like, this is how you get better. This is how this gets healed. Like, yes, obviously you need the gels, you need the sports drink. There's no debating that. There's enough science, we can all point to, but you also need the meal when you get home, and you need a proper dinner, and you need some snacks throughout the day. And I think that gets missed a lot too, that overall fueling.
Yeah, and I think as the community of social media, we hate those all what I ate in a day posts because it was always someone who's like, I ate 7 rice cakes today, but I put peanut butter in this one and jelly on this one. So like that kind of ruined the whole community on what I ate in a day, even though a good what I eat in a day is actually helpful for people to show I ran a long run today and this is this smorgasbord of stuff I had today.
I think that we're going to give another shout out to Holly. I think that the source is important for that kind of content, right?
Mhm.
So it's like if you are following, there are some people who genuinely and good intentioned runners who are following running influencers who not only do they not fuel their bodies well, and yet they're sharing their what I eat in a day, but they're also not qualified to speak on what that should look like, right? And so that's a double whammy, you know. If you are on social media and you follow folks like Stephanie, if you follow folks like sports registered dietitians like Holly, who's also eating disorder specialized as well, and I also want to say that just like in any profession, there are just like run coaches and personal trainers and psychotherapists and registered dietitians. There are registered dietitians, and this can be a whole other podcast and
Yes.
conversation that I can
Yes.
go off on that are we need to stop pretending that there is not an eating disorder issue within the dietitian community as well. Just
Ugh, amen. Yeah.
so that's a whole I have a for my industry, I have a whole piece of content coming out on that
We're
with fitness
ready.
professionals. But there are really wonderful resources, and one of the it's funny because it's so true and so important. Something that Holly often shares is her toddler Owen's meal, and she shares that like this is Owen's breakfast. Like you can have some of you are not eating as much as my toddler Owen's breakfast like this is your sign to increase the amount of pieces of toast you have on your plate, or the amount of eggs you have on your, or whatever she's sharing. So
Also think
yeah, that's good.
Featherstone does a really good job of having like little charts where it's like, here's what you should eat. Like, are you running for this much? Are you running for that much? Here's what you need in a day. And it's just pictures that like I will encourage my clients to print out and put on their fridge as that like visual cue too, that I
Hmm.
think is helpful.
Yeah, the infographics are definitely helpful. And any dietitian who also shares, I believe it's called the athlete's plate.
Yeah.
That content is really wonderful too.
Yes.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about what does healthy training actually look like from a psychological standpoint?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting. I don't always love the word healthy. I think like, or I should say, we should define what we're identifying as healthy, like healthy in your body, healthy in your mind. So for me, what that looks like, again, flexibility is key here. And that might mean you have to change up your runs. You have to take more rest days. You might have to, skip a whole week because you have the flu and like deal with that or whatever it is, or your kids have the flu. Um, Flexibility might mean shortening your run, or it might mean like you have to actually change the race you picked because for whatever reason, like you're not getting in what you need to. And sometimes we have to look at ourselves and say, like, okay, this isn't going to work. And this is where it's really helpful to sort out our identity as like, We're not elite athletes. Unless someone is paying you to do that race, we can shift. Uh, but I think the flexibility in both practice of your training plan and your mind, right? Like that idea of like, okay, the snow day is such a good example because we did just get, almost 2 feet of snow here and lots of people couldn't run. And it's like, cool, let's just be happy we all get a snow day. We can like snuggle on the couch and watch a movie or, go to work in our pajamas from our couch, whatever it is, as opposed to feeling really stressed. Like, oh my God, I missed a day. Now that I'm going to have to make it up. Or, like how much distress are these things causing you? Do you look forward to a rest day? Because I actually think that's also a sign of health that like, you know, whatever, Sunday's my day off. I get to sleep in a little. I usually like to watch Is It Cake with my kids in bed a little bit. And like, that's like our fun Sunday thing to do. And I really look forward to that. And also my body really needs it by the time I hit my rest day. But I think when people are incapable of taking a rest day, we would say like, that's a sign of definitely not being healthy. And again, I think like flexibility with food, responding to hunger is really important. Knowing your personal hunger cues is really important too. And I know I sound redundant, but that like overall eating, not just what I think of as like performance eating, quote unquote, like the intra eating.
Yeah. I've had the same rest day Mondays since 2011 when I came back to running, and I've probably run on probably the same one two hands how many times I've run on a Monday probably in the last 15 years. Every Monday I just look forward. I don't run, no reason to. It's not a big deal. I always excited for it. So that's always been a big sign for me that hey, I love my rest day and I'm never even interested in running on it. So I think that's always a great sign when I have an athlete who is, oh, I'm going to give you one day off, nothing to do, and they're willing, and I don't see like cross training show up in their log every week secretly. I'm always like, yes, we're doing it right. Like, you have one day at least every week where you do nothing. You don't even feel compelled to do strength.
Even something like, all jokes aside, Pilates on your rest day,
Or yoga, that's
why
like,
did you why did what compelled you to have to take a 3-mile walk on your
right.
on your rest day, right? So those are some of the are there any other like sneaky disordered behaviors that are, to us as coaches who are informed in this and try to stop it in its tracks, are there any other sneaky behaviors that you see, Stephanie?
Well, I think those are the sneaky movement behaviors, right? They're like, oh, but my dog really needed to go out for that extra hour on our walk or like whatever it is. Um, I think another behavior is eating less on your rest day or eating less on days. Now, this is tricky too, right? Like on a higher volume day, you may be hungrier. So it makes sense to eat more. And that's the responding to hunger piece. But eating less with like just intentionally, again, because you're using a metric of I only ran X amount today. So I'm going to eat less, whether it's overall or carbs or whatever. I think that's a sneaky behavior. Um, and I think there are some sneaky mental things. Like I think something I like to identify with folks is what their thought patterns are when they're having a bad run. And so I think a healthy thought pattern is like, wow, today just sucks. Or I should have got more sleep. I wish I didn't have that glass of wine. Or for me, sometimes like, my daughter woke up with a fever. So of course my run is shitty. I was up at 2 a.m. giving someone Tylenol, right? Like, whereas I think sneaky thoughts are like, I bet if I lost 5 pounds, I would be faster. Oh, I shouldn't have eaten that thing because it's weighing me down. Those thoughts that we're tying to either like a way that we want our body to look or that we want our body to weigh, I think is a sneaky thought pattern that's unhealthy.
Those are great. Talked about it a little bit in the beginning. What does recovery look like for a runner, someone who is medically not allowed. What is the term? There
Like not cleared medically.
well, what does it look like for somebody? Maybe we could do both. What does it look like for somebody who is medically cleared to continue in their sport? And what kind of happens? What would shut down the operation?
You know what's interesting is when we're talking about medical clearance, we need an MD. And I think one of the most frustrating things is it's a gamble.
Mm,
There are some MDs in the city who I think are fantastic, who I try and get someone who, if I'm working with them and an injury pops up, I try and get them under their care. I'm working with an athlete who's playing a D1 sport, not running, but and her doctor keeps clearing her. And me and the dietitian are like, this girl has not menstruated for quite some time. It's so clear she's under the weight that the MD actually, like a weight spectrum, even if we try not to focus too much on weight when we're talking about medical clearance. Uh, she's an adult. She wants to play her sport at college, of course. So it's really hard to get her to see another doctor. And when we talk about like a hierarchy of medical professionals, the doctor is the one that has to do medical clearance. When we're talking about college athletes, that's who has to sign off on their ability to play or not. And so you would hope that you wouldn't get medical clearance if you were underweight, which would be identified based on your very specific body and injury history. Um, if you were not menstruating, I see a lot of people get medical clearance even if they're not menstruating. Um, but the three of us are not in a position to say, like, you're medically cleared or not. We can encourage folks, like, it doesn't seem like a good idea to move right now. But a lot of times we're at odds with the medical community.
At least for coaches in that kind of regard, though, if you are informed, you could not play the athlete. You could not have them, whether they're clear or not. You could say, on my team, I don't think you're ready for this, so we're going to bench you until things get different. I know it's a hard line to take, probably in a college atmosphere, but you can, as a coach, kind of do that stuff.
That's
I
true.
have, I have, yeah, and that it is hard because it's hard for somebody in like you said, Nick, in college. It's different, but we can speak on behalf of the majority of the runners who work with us. Majority are recreational runners, and you may be, to Stephanie's earlier point about code of ethics. Your coin is no good for me, for Nick, for Stephanie, if you're not well, right? So you can you can to run, to train, but if the signs and symptoms of your health are not in favor of a quote unquote health promoting training plan, then it's not going to work for us long term.
But you know what's interesting though, Amanda? Like on my end, I do a lot of work with folks encouraging them to be honest with their run coaches.
Good.
I'll say like, your coach may or may not feel comfortable or have asked you if you're menstruating. Do they know? A lot of times you guys probably have like maybe a more thorough intake than even coaches who I really think are fantastic. But it's also with the recreational runners. Some people don't think to give all the details, right? Or they don't think like, oh, this person needs to know that because this person's programming my runs. I don't, so I think a lot of times what I end up doing is encouraging people like, no, you're paying this person. They really do care. They want to know those things. So to speak to what you're saying, if you know that, I think then you're able to go, hey, we got to shut this down. And it's not even a lot of times that people are intentionally dishonest. It's that kind of being able to share or knowing what should be shared, that kind of thing.
Such a good point.
It's really good. I think one of the things I learned early, I coach a lot of females compared to male athletes, and I made it I try and always make an encouraging environment to talk about that stuff because I feel like I don't know for sure. It feels like it's harder for a lot of women to talk about it with men. And sometimes they'll be like, sorry, TMI. And I'm like, well, that's not TMI. I need to know. And if you want to share about it, then we'll talk about it. But I need to also know this stuff to be able to support you. So setting up sort of an environment where people, at least my female athletes, feel comfortable talking about this stuff so I can adjust and help them and just know the information to help make more informed decisions.
Totally. Yeah.
So I think that we covered a lot of what what we the things that coaches kind of questions that coaches can ask, or some of the things that coaches can look for in their athletes. And although this is a running podcast, I do think that it's important, if you are anyone who works with bodies, whether you are a personal trainer or even an instructor, and uh, one of your students has confided in you or exhibited behaviors that are um, disordered in nature. What do you wish that more fitness professionals, more run coaches understood about eating disorders and disordered eating?
I actually wish that they understood what the two of you were saying earlier on, that if they made the referral, people want that. People feel seen, they feel cared for. They might, particularly with run coaches, fitness professionals, like people are trying to get strong and trying to accomplish their goals. And I think that a lot of people don't know what to say and then they don't say it. Um, I recently got a call from a friend of mine who's a run coach, and she said, "Can I just ask you what I should say in this to this person? Because I want to say something, I don't know what to say." And I was so happy to be able to chat with her for a few minutes and tell her what I thought would be something appropriate to say. But at the end of the day, really, it was like, "Hey, I'm a little worried about you. What do you feel about hiring a dietitian and or a therapist to talk to about this?" Um, and so I'm not even giving you that broad of a clinical answer, because I think that what I wish people understood was that when we name things and we have a concern and express it, that goes a long way. That we don't have to be detectives waiting for an injury and looking and saying this person never takes a rest day, or they told me they were in pain and they didn't. Instead of shutting something down for 2 weeks, they just transitioned to the elliptical all the time. Like, some of those things, of course, are signs. But I wish that people understood that, like, if you have a concern, it's really helpful to just say it.
I worked with a nutritionist or sports dietitian, Kylie. And so one of the things why I bring that up is I worked with her 3 months and I learned a lot about fueling, all these tricks, all these techniques, all these ways to fuel, how to look at it differently, how to get her perspective and her mindset around it all. And for 3 months, I tried real hard to work on improving my diet and just learning things I didn't know, and how to really, in some ways, learned how to kind of match your eating towards your training, which was a new concept for me. I mean, I always knew in my mind, oh, it's a workout day. My mind needs to be prepared for this, a longer day. My mind needs, but not like my everyday, all eating throughout the day should adapt because of the intensity of the workouts. That was like new for me to kind of, everyone else knew it, but it was new for me at the time. And why I
I
tell
don't
this
think
story
everyone
was,
knows that.
yeah, I know. Okay. But yes. And so why I tell this story is I shared a lot with my athletes. We do I do a newsletter with them. I talk with them on the phone, and I shared a lot of my experiences either on social media or other places of working with her. And it brought out a lot of conversations from them of talking about it and what did I learn and how did it help. I had her do a call with my athletes. And so all those things sort of gave them, still my athletes have conversations about me. They're like, oh, I remember you worked with Kylie. I think maybe I want to work with a nutritionist or a dietitian, sports dietitian, and those types of things. And so for me, it was learning and then being willing to share that kind of experience with my athletes that gave them the kind of ability to kind of communicate back their fears and understandings around food.
Yeah, I think it's such a good point too. It destigmatizes it, right? Like, I work with Lauren Antonucci, who's a sports dietitian in the city. And I probably work with her every couple of years, just as, like, I feel like I know what I should be doing, but I am sure that things fall through the cracks. Like, can we meet a little and we'll just do like a checkup. Uh, I don't have to be starving all the time or losing fitness or some big reason. It's like, I just want to make sure I'm doing the right thing. And I think, you working with that with Kylie and then sharing it also allows other people to go like, oh, maybe that's something I should do. Um, and same with an, informed therapist. Like we can help people get a lot, go far, but we have to destigmatize it all.
Yeah, I mean, as a coach, I just looked at it as CEUs, almost like a learning credits for me to learn about something and kind of on myself, as opposed to like reading a book or something, which I could do. But if it's on me, I'm learning a lot more. I always feel like that's my learning style. So I was like, I'll just be the experiment and learn while I'm doing.
Yeah.
I was muted because the ice was falling. I apologize. Yes, if you are in New York, I need you to do one of two things: either walk under some scaffolding to keep yourself safe, or uh, just in an empty street. Okay, because that's where we're at in New York, and I'm guessing in New Jersey as well, Stephanie.
I'm in the city today and I will say I'm in Midtown and it is such a mess walking around. I was like, I should have worn my snow boots. I wore shoes I don't care about that much, but it's
Scary.
so slushy.
I feel like it's the
Yes.
same car as honking in Amanda's feed and then later coming to you, Stephanie. And
Yeah.
it's the same
Yeah.
car.
Yeah. Exactly.
Just driving
Probably.
downtown.
Yeah.
What should a runner do, or anyone who engages in sport, if they suspect they're struggling?
It's the same thing like we were just saying with the dietitian. I always, runner or anyone, think if you have the thought, like, I wonder if a therapist could help me, then a therapist can help you. Um, you don't have to be in crisis. So I think if someone suspects that they're struggling, in whatever area they suspect they're struggling, reach out for help. Like it sort of actually ties in everything we were saying from the disordered piece. Like you don't want a full blown eating disorder. So if you think your eating is disordered, go get help before it gets worse. Uh, so I think that if someone suspects that they are struggling, reaching out for help, and again, this is where if you have a good run coach, they can give you referrals. If you have a good friend who you suspect might have engaged in any of these services, they can give you referrals. Um, ask the people in your life who they would use and go see someone.
Yeah, there's experts out there. I mean, that's the reason. It's just, to your point, don't wait till breakdown. And just it's a learning experience. That's what I learned from my experience. I learned more about it than I would from scouring the internet where it's terrible out there, or using AI, which no, or using social media posts and trying to weed through the good and the bad. It was just working with someone who had the knowledge and was willing to share it with me so I could then become more knowledgeable in my own life. That was the win.
Yeah. And I hope that that's how people use social media to like get the idea that like, oh, wait, maybe I'm struggling, but then I need to go outside of my little box and find help. Not get help on social media or AI or
And
yeah.
it's your body. And that's I think people sometimes are apprehensive because, well, I'm not really a competitive runner. I'm not trying to even PR maybe at this point in my life. So why would I need to waste air quotes, waste my money or go see someone? I'm just running for me. You're going to do harm to your body that can't be repaired. And not only that, but mental trauma that I hear so many people who had it in their younger ages that are still deal with it now because it comes up in every instance. And so instead of dealing with that trauma and getting to that point, address the things. But like if you're running and you're an endurance sport athlete, you're an athlete. I always like to say, if you're running, you're an athlete. People will always want to clarify themselves a little bit and say, well, I'm not racing for PRs. I'm not, but you're doing a sport. Running is a sport and you're in it. So think of yourself that way. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think that in some ways, even if we said, okay, fine, maybe you're not trying to PR, but like, aren't you also just trying to feel good to like walk your dog or play with your kids or get to work without, like in some ways, I also try and de-emphasize the running part because like it's your body and your body is all like matters in all of the things that you do, even if you're not just concerned with running. And I also say to people like, yeah, but don't you still want to be running and not PRing when you're 60, 70, 80 or going for long walks? Like, uh, But I think to your point, Nick, like it's your body. It doesn't even matter if you're a runner. Like if you suspect something's off, go get it checked out.
That's a good point.
I think that it is time for some secrets. And Stephanie's smiling because she's a listener of the pod. Some
Yes.
secret guest interview questions. Coach Nick?
Yep, we changed them up because she knew them. No,
Oh,
I'm kidding.
okay.
We didn't.
All
We
right,
didn't know
got
how to
it.
do that.
Got it.
I
all
knew
right,
them
Stephanie.
last time.
Yeah. All right, Stephanie. Here we go.
Oh, okay.
Question the first. What's the best piece of advice you've ever received?
In general, the best piece of advice I've ever received. I think this sounds so cliche, but it's what's coming to mind is that you can do a lot more than you think you can do. Like sort of that go for it idea. But I do feel like that sounds really cliche, but that is what's coming to mind.
No, we like it. No one's
I
ever
like
said
that
it
a
before.
lot.
Yeah.
I don't normally, I think that in an age that really emphasizes mediocre, mainly men on microphones, constantly shooting their shots and scoring. Yeah, you could be doing more, and you should be, and you deserve to show off, show up in that way. So I think that's a very, very important and not cliche piece of guidance for our listeners.
No, we
Thanks,
love
Doc.
Yeah, thank you. And just so you know, I had it written down, so you got it right. So you got that one right. Good job. Question the second. What's one thing that people are generally surprised to find out about you?
You know, this has been coming up a lot lately. I'm not an animal person. Like my kids really want a dog. I don't like dogs. I don't like a cat. I don't like anything about them.
Thank God. Thank God.
I have two
But people are always surprised that like, which is funny because I think people who really know me are not surprised. But yeah, don't bring your pets near me. I don't want to pet them
or me. I'm good. Also, thank you, Stephanie.
All right. I will leave my cats and dogs at home. All right. Last question. Question number 3. What's something you wish more people understood about your industry?
That just because you're a therapist doesn't mean you know what you're doing. And that just because someone graduated from school also doesn't make them a good therapist. Like I'm constantly in trainings, I'm constantly in supervision. I think every therapist should be in therapy at all times. But I think that people see letters behind someone's name and just assume that they're good. I also think I wish people understood, like, you can ask questions when you call someone and you want to make an appointment. Ask questions that matter to you and see if you vibe with the person. And if you don't, like, find someone else. One bad therapeutic experience should not deter you from finding a good therapist.
Well said. Just like any industry, coaches to anyone, we all want the right people, and you should find the right person for you. Everyone's not right for you. And I think people do have bad experience with therapists and think, oh, well, therapy's not for me.
Right.
I feel like they do that more often than run coaches because I think people are more accustomed to interviewing run coaches and being like, all right, well, I didn't like the vibe with so-and-so, but I'll try this one. And with therapists, I feel like it's one try for a little bit, and then just therapy isn't for me.
Right. I always say to people, therapy is a relationship. Like imagine going on 2 dates and going like, relationships aren't for me. Like no one does that, but a good therapy experience requires a good therapeutic relationship. So it is worth finding a person.
Well said. And 100%. So
look at that.
Great job. All right, back to you, Amanda.
Yes, it is back to the end. We are at the end. I did want to ask before you tell people where they can find you, if somebody is listening to this and they're like, Stephanie, I just like you. Do I need to, do I have to be struggling myself to work with somebody like you as a therapist, or is that like your specific niche?
No, that's my niche. You know, that's a great question because I think sometimes I put myself in a corner too much. Like I work with people of all kinds. Like don't just think you need to have an eating disorder to reach out to me. I work, with a lot of general population folks. And I love that too.
Good, good. Yeah, you should pop your ish. Okay, you should. I love that. Folks aren't following you, or where can people find you so that they can follow
So
your work and reach out to you?
yeah, my website is srgpsychotherapy.com, just my initial psychotherapy. And then I'm much less active on social media, but I'm at Embodied Psychotherapist on Instagram. Um, Trying to find the motivation to get back on there. It'll come at some
I
point.
feel the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. We'll
Thank
have
you.
that in the show notes. We hope you enjoyed this episode. You, Stephanie, and everyone listening, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen or watch the podcast. We are on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Those reviews and your words really go a long way. So make it 5 stars. Reach out to us at any time, and we will see you on the next episode.
Bye.
Bye.